Well, it's that time of the year again. It's Lent. And it's the time to follow Jesus into the dusty desert. To follow him through the dusty paths, over the dusty hills, into the space that seems empty and endless. Into the space where the sun always seems to shine with light to see. Into the space where we feel exposed and vulnerable. Into the space where we are called to let our guards down and be real, be honest about what life is really like for us, and not pretend how we really feel when we are pushed to our limits, when we feel raw to our core. It's Lent, and it's time to follow Jesus into the dusty desert. So that means it is also the time to go into those dusty places within our hearts and lives, to go into those areas that look desolate, those areas that look like there is no life at all, that look too broken to fix, too far gone to save, that look too hopeless even. Yet as we follow Jesus into the Lenten desert, we follow him into the hope that is found within the hopeless. We follow him into the life that is found within the lifeless. For God is guiding us there to have our eyes open with the real knowledge of what is good and evil, not the tricky stuff that makes us cower in fear and hide ourselves, not the tricky stuff that forgets what God can do for us in the desert, but the real knowledge that comes with receiving the free gift of grace that somehow makes us all okay. For in the desert we receive grace to cover our human vulnerability, grace to cover our limits, grace to fill our raw emptiness, grace to do something with our dust, grace to see ourselves as we truly are and to have courage to not hide. For we follow Jesus into the dusty desert to see and to know truth and to be freed by it. To look at ourselves, at our relationships, at our purpose in life, at our walk with God, and surrender it all to the grace of God. And trust that God's grace can make it all into something good. That means any relationship that you're struggling with. That means any attempts that you have made to change your life that have not yielded the results you're hoping for. That means any difficulty you've had with your own walk with God, even if it feels like something you've barely started or can barely put one foot in front of the other. It's time to sit in the dusty desert, to sit in the endless sun, and surrender it all to the grace of God. It's time to hear about who we truly are and be given the grace to believe it. To receive the grace to stop beating ourselves up for not being good enough, for not being better, for not being all that we wanted to be, for not living up to some unrealistic standard of how to be human. To receive the grace to shut our ears to all of the negative lies said about who we are, about what we should have, about how we should live, even if it's just heard in the echoes of our own minds. It's time to sit in the dusty desert, in the endless sun, and to surrender it all to the grace of God. It's time to be quiet, to wait, to listen to the Spirit. For grace has something else for us to hear. And it starts with hearing the dusty wind in the desert. Hearing the haunting silence in the endless space that makes us so uncomfortable with ourselves. But we can't, because we cannot but help to hear the pounding rat race in our own heads. Don't worry, the rat race stops at one point or another. And after the dust settles, you will hear something different. That you are worthy of the grace that comes to wait upon you while you are there. And while the desert is only for a season, the good news is that it is a journey through life that ends with new life, restoration, reformation, and resurrection. Yet it's not that this new life is given to us as a prize at the end of a term of testing, like we have to somehow work for it. There is a great purpose for us in the desert that is also life-giving. As we come face to face with those lies that are rooted in our hearts, we give space for them to die, space for them to be uprooted, space for the lies to no longer reign. And that's an important part of being restored, of being transformed. That too is a gift of grace. And so we go into the desert to see what is found in the dusty shadows and to hear the taunts and the accusations that cause us to question who we truly are, who God is, and what this life can possibly hold for us. We go into the desert to learn how to not be afraid of what is in the dusty shadows and to receive a new faith in the grace of God to sustain us. We go into the desert to let go of any lies that have led us astray because we do not need to carry them with us any longer. And while we are there, we receive the gift of a new depth, the gift of new grounding, of new freedom, of new knowledge of who we really are and who God really is. A new understanding of what we really need in this life. This is the grace for us there. And we go bravely into the desert because Jesus went there first. Because he came out of it. We know we'll come out of it too. Because he went through it, we know we will need to go through it too. The desert is not a punishment. It is a life-giving gift of grace. And so Lent is not a season to punish ourselves, or to look at our sin and say, woe is me, I am an awful human being. It is not a season to fear sin and evil and the worst of what happens in this world. Instead, it's a time for us to say, God, I'm yours. Do with me what you will. It's a time when we, as Luther reminds us, let God be God. The desert is a time to let God be God. To let go of the rope. To let go of the reins. To let go of the steering wheel. To let go of our need to control the way things work out. The Spirit is driving us to journey into the desert to let God be God and to rely on what God has for us there. What greater grace is there for us in this life? At the Ash Wednesday service at Christ the King, our foreheads were marked with the dust of the desert, the dust of the earth from which we all come, the dust of the stars from which our earth was formed, the dust of the ashes of our pride, our regret, our failures, our sin, our brokenness. And because of Christ Jesus, we can look at all that dust in our lives and trust that God raises life out of dust. Grace can take the dust of our lives, the desert of our lives, and make them into something good. So this Lent, let's go into the desert together and see what's there. Let's go deeper into our hearts and peer at the dust that is in need of the breath of God to transform it into life. Let's go into the desert and let go of our need to find our God elsewhere, for nothing other than what God has for us will do. In the desert, we do not need to be tempted to fix ourselves or try to make it all better on our own. We do not need to be tempted to stretch ourselves more than is actually humanly possible. We do not need to be tempted to reach for more than what we need. We do not need to be fooled by what is lurking around trying to convince us that we are someone other than who we are. For we all come into the desert to find our true self and to leave our false self behind. For your truest self comes only from God and was made to let God be God, to let God work within you while you rest from trying to work on yourself. What greater gift is there for us in this life? So let's go in the desert and rest. Rest from needing to have everything in our lives sorted out. Rest from needing to be model citizens, model parents, model Christians, model fill in the blanks. Let's go into the desert and let God be God and trust that even there, grace will give us what we need and teach us who we really are and help us to let go of what we don't need.